Hello and welcome as we go one-on-one here on Bulldog Illustrated. Our guest today, my illustrious old friend, Mark Schlabach. Mark, appreciate you being with us, buddy. And, it's always a bad thing in sports when the news creeps onto the sports page. And, man, this has been unlike anything we've ever seen, hasn't it?
Nah, it's been crazy. Thanks for having me, JD. Yeah, I mean, with this time we'd be cranking up for preseason and doing all the media days. I never thought I'd miss SEC media days. I usually that's the one week out of the year I despise. But hopefully we get to play. It's been crazy. I mean, this is probably the biggest event any of us will go through in our lifetimes. I hope it doesn't get worse than this.
Yeah, no kidding. And, one of the things I think with every coach, everybody I've talked to in every line of work, there's some good things that can come out of bad. And I think for all of us, not taking anything for granted. I mean, I've said a million times, when we played that 20-inning baseball game against Clemson, Dave Johnson and I are sitting there, we need to change this rule and there. What I wouldn't give to call a 20-inning game. It's like you said, what I wouldn't give to be over at media days to see these psychotic Alabama fans fighting to get Nick Saban's autograph.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm excited about baseball coming back. I actually watched exhibition games the last couple of nights. I'll take anything. I've even watched some Australian rules football and a little bit of cricket. So it's I haven't watched much of Korean baseball. I don't know. I couldn't get into it.
Well, Mark, we go way back, and just some of the stories. I'll tell you a couple that I really remember. You and I both like the crawfish etouffee at Harry Bissett's, amongst other things. And we were together for two of the great upsets of all time. When Arizona State beat Nebraska in football, and then when Holyfield is an 18-1 underdog, took out Mike Tyson that night. I think you bought me a beer that evening.
I think I bought a lot of people a beer that night. It's funny. I still see Alice Lee from time to time out at the golf course. She lives out at Tuscaloosa, and I'll see her out there. And I spend many nights in front of that woman at the bar.
Well, Mark, let's talk about your career. I'm so proud of you. And literally, you climbed the ladder, red and black, the Athens paper, the Atlanta paper, onto ESPN. And you've authored all these books. You don't even have a count. So we're going to unofficially go with 24. How in the world have you found the time to write the books? Because it's a lot harder than it seems, along with what you do every day.
When somebody calls and wants to do a book, if my agent calls, I've got the same line for about every client. I can write it fast, just don't expect Gone with the Wind. The publishers nowadays, they won't give you but 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks to write a book. So you got to turn it out fast, and that's probably my strength since I started writing, was that I was fast. I don't know that it's any good, but I'm fast and it's clean. And that's been helpful in turning out books. Typically I'll spend most of the summer writing books. This year's been a little bit different because we're having to make phone calls every day to find out what's changed in the last 24 hours, even though it's going to change 24 hours later. So, it's been fun.
Well, this is one of those deals, and we're not at all getting into this season because by the time this airs, 10 things could have changed. And, of course, I'm sure you do. I get asked every day, hey, are we playing? What's going to happen? And I think it's one of those deals that everybody knows just enough for it to be a little bit dangerous. So trying to predict this, it's really impossible right now.
Nah, I mean, I go from 20% one week to 50% the next, and it fluctuates every day. I feel a little bit better about it this week than I did last week. 2 weeks ago, I didn't think there was any chance whatsoever, but it just seems like, from what I've heard from particularly out of the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 in the last 7 to 10 days, that they're hopeful and they're cautiously optimistic. The next couple of weeks are going to be really important.
Again, talking about some good things can come out of bad times. I think one thing, and I'm sure whenever you want to create some conjecture, and certainly on our talk shows, when we're looking for a topic, all you got to do is bring up the schedule. And one thing I've always said, there's no way of denying it. Even the powers that be, the commissioners and everybody, schedules in the 70s and 80s used to be a lot better. So with the possibility of playing conference only, and whenever things get back to normal here, college football might be back at a spot where it was in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s before the TV explosion, where you had to schedule interesting games and meaningful games. And I think with what Georgia's done with Kirby, when you look at some of these future schedules, I think that's a good sign of some things that could be coming. So are you in agreement that maybe one thing we could see here in the future is better scheduling?
Yeah, I mean, I've said for 4 or 5 years now, and Nick Saban was one of the first people to say it to me, that, I think at some point the top 50, 60 programs are going to break away from everybody else. And I think financial reasons could cause that to happen coming out of this. I think even if we play, a complete season this year, there are going to be a lot of schools in the group of five and at FCS and even some of the Power Five programs that have struggled financially that are not going to get the money they've been getting from universities in terms of direct financial, institutional support. I think you could see the Power Five break off, maybe, add some teams. Notre Dame, certainly, you'd have to figure out what to do with some others. But, there's no reason for Georgia State and, my apologies, Jeff, Georgia Southern and South Alabama and Arkansas State and Fresno State to try to be competing with Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Florida, Clemson financially. It's irresponsible. And to be honest with you, I don't think Georgia and Auburn and all those other schools should be having to prop up those smaller schools with paycheck games. And that's why attendance has wavered so badly here lately. People get tired of going and watching those games in 90-degree heat. But if you bring in Notre Dame, if you bring in Oregon, if you bring in Ohio State, people will show up and they'll be excited about it.
I agree with you. Plus, you've got every game on TV. And for years and years in sports, we've had the deal where you've had the attendance, you've had the television. It's literally being able to have your cake and eat it too. And it looks like certainly for a while, at least, that's going to change. So I'm with you 100% on all that. Mark, let's talk about your career. You mentioned Notre Dame. Now you grew up a huge Fighting Irish fan. I know you're still a big Chicago Cubs fan. So kind of take us through your youth and how you found your way to the University of Georgia.
I grew up right outside of South Bend, Indiana, and I grew up a Notre Dame fan. I like to say that I grew up. But my first newspaper job was delivering the South Bend Tribune, and I can still remember sitting on my parents' front steps on Sunday afternoons or Sunday mornings before and reading about which team Jerry Faust lost to the night before. That's kind of how I became a college football fan. But we moved down to Atlanta, I think when I was in 7th grade, and I went to Norcross High School, and I think Notre Dame sent me a rejection letter in about 3 days, and I settled on the University of Georgia and, went to school there and had a great time at the Grady School, and the rest is kind of history.
Oh, Albus was excited to see you there. Mark, another famous story that you were involved in, and I guess this is good timing with Albus barking there, was the 1997 Kentucky game when your sweet chocolate lab Tubby got loose there. And I guess this year, was that the Kentucky game week that got so much play? I mean, was that the reason? But
that was, yeah, I think that was the plan because it was we missed the 20-year window the year before because I was working on the Adidas basketball trials and didn't have time to do it. But they brought it back last year, and it was supposed to run Kentucky week, but then game day showed up at Notre Dame game in Athens, and they ended up putting it on there, and I talked to Marty and McGee about it on their set, so it was fun. It's a great story, and, my favorite story about that or line about that is my dog made it into the Washington Post before I did. It took me about 15, 20 more years to get there, but yeah, he was a mess. We lived right off Cloverhurst. He was an escape artist. We tried everything to keep him in the backyard, and no matter what we did, he'd get out. And that day, he followed some tailgaters to the stadium, and Michael Adams, the Georgia president at the time, I saw him later, and he said he saw him go in with the band right before halftime, so that's how he got in there.
And when he was running around, I never will forget it. Everybody's chasing the dog, and I was sitting one row behind you in the Dan McGill press box, and I just remember you turning and looking at Tony Barnhart and going, "Oh my God, that's my dog."
I was white as a ghost, and I remember Plot Bryce, who you remember, the old AJC guy. He was sitting next to me, and he knew who Tubby was, and he was as white as I was. And he said, "You better go find Claude." And I went and found Claude Felton, and he was on his walkie-talkie. He said, "We need to find the owner of that." He goes, "We need to find the owner of that dog." And I said, "Here I am." And he's like, "What?" And he was, and fortunately, a animal control officer came out of the stands and took him away to the pound, and I got him out on Monday. And I think I ended up getting 2 or 3 tickets, not having my dog on a leash, public nuisance, something like that. And one of my poker buddies at the time, Billy Heelan, ended up representing the dog. I wanted him to plead temporary insanity because Georgia was like 6-1 or 7-1 or something like that. But Billy wouldn't go through for it. But the judge, who was a sweet lady, and court said, "I hate to ask the question, were there any witnesses?" And I said, 86,117, Your Honor. She dropped all the charges.
Another funny aside to that, I always sat next to Coach McGill during the games, and some of the student assistants who worked for Claude, all females, are standing around. "Oh, that dog's so cute." And Coach says, "Well, now you know they're going to have to take it to the pound and shoot it." They all about burst into tears and said, he's kidding. The dog's going to be fine." So
that's probably what my wife might have been happy with that. She was not a big fan of Tubby.
Now, you and Heather, correct me, did you guys meet at a wedding? Is that right?
Yeah. Her roommate married one of my fraternity brothers from Georgia, and we met at the wedding.
So, and you guys have got 3 kids, and they're all grown up now. So you got to do grown up things like pay for college. It doesn't seem like that long ago that, we were growing up kind of working in the business, and all of our roommates and friends were drinking, going to the games, having fun, and we were working. And now here you are, got to put kids through college.
Yeah, I've been working since I was about 18, and I'll probably work until I'm about 90 with 3 women in the house. But Caroline she'll be a sophomore in Athens. She's moving into a house in a couple of weeks. Is really excited about getting back to campus. And Jane is a high school senior, wants to go to Athens as well. And then Jack, we're just hoping to get him through high school. He's a little different than the girls.
Mark, of all the books that you've written, is there one or two that's a favorite? Now, I've got to think the Duck Dynasty one has to be pretty satisfying because it was obviously up at the top of the list, and also it's out of that sports realm. So I'm going to use one of these modern terms. You expanded your brand with that one.
Yeah, probably that one, because I'll never have a franchise like that again, an opportunity like that. I mean, I hope one comes along, but that one, it was. I just finished Bobby Bowden's memoir with him, and the editor on that book was from Monroe, Louisiana, and went to church with the Robertson family. She called me one night and said, "Do you duck hunt? We got a family of duck hunters we want to do a book with." And I said, I've been a couple of times. I never get to go because it's always right after football. And I saw them, but that was the night before Duck Dynasty first aired, and they were on 2020. And I called her back the next morning and said, "I want that book." So I went and did Willie and Corey's book first, and then while I was there, they took me out to meet Phil. And Phil said, "If you're smart enough to write Willie's book, you're smart enough to write mine." And I think we ended up doing 7 books, and it was a phenomenon. It was nuts.
So that really was one of those things, and obviously you earn your opportunity with your phenomenal work and your relationships, but also the personal relationships. And there was a bit of a harmonic convergence there, and just well done taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I've caught a lot of lucky breaks in my career, no question about it. I mean, I've worked my tail off, but that one, if Phyllis never reaches out, I think she just felt like a redneck writer with a bunch of rednecks would probably work pretty well together. And I talk about I wrote some of those books. I mean, they were bam, bam, bam. I wrote them in 4 or 5 weeks, and I was writing for my audience. The best part was, I think it was in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal did a story about the books, and because I think at one point, like 3 of them were in the top 10 of the New York Times bestsellers list, which doesn't say a lot about my writing. It says more about America. But they interviewed Phil, and he said this guy shows up, sits on my couch for 3 days, goes home, writes a book, and the next thing they tell me is it's a #1 New York Times bestseller, and he still hadn't read the damn thing. And I don't know that he's read it to this day, but it was fun. Those probably more than any. Bowden was the first big book I did, and he was so gracious, and he's such a wonderful human being, and he had some great stories. Probably those. I did a book, Woodlawn, which was a movie about Tony Nathan and Jeff Rutledge at Woodlawn High School in Birmingham, right at the time of desegregation, and I think that's probably the best book I've read in terms of being a good book.
Well, and I think that's a good lesson too. And another reason it's good that we're getting sports back, and we certainly do need it back, because sports, and we certainly see it, it's a great release for so many people. It's a great distraction, but it's an incredible unifier. Sports brings people together on all fronts.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think, this country's probably more divided than it's ever been. It's one of the reasons I got off of Twitter a couple of years ago, the main reason I got off Twitter a couple of years ago. And I think Twitter and social media is a large part of that division, but we can all root for college football and for college football to come back, and root for our teams and have fun doing it.
Well, again, another perfect segue, because I was going to ask you, especially when you break some of these stories. I mean, you've literally been Scoop Schlabach. I picture you back in the 50s wearing the hat with a big press sticker on there. So when you break these stories and a school's in trouble, I'm thinking about, say, Arizona basketball, what are some of I've got to think some of these tweets are so mean, you've just got to laugh at them. Do you have a couple that stand out to you?
Yeah, you got to have really thick skin, and you can't take it personally. I think my wife takes it more personally than I do, but my daughters still get on YouTube. When we broke the Cam Newton story, me and Pat Forty and Chris Lowe, they sent me to Auburn for the next game against Chattanooga, I think it was, and the guy in New York decided to put me right outside Jordan-Hare Stadium where they do the Tiger Walk, and some guy just starts wailing on me. I mean, not physically, but just screaming at me, standing right behind me while I'm on TV, and ESPN security called and said, "Get him out of there." And I had a police escort back to my truck. But the cop who took me back to the truck said, "Rough morning." I said, "Yeah, it was kind of rough, a little worse than I expected." He said, "Well, you done messed with a legend." I was like, "A legend? He's been here for 2 months." And he goes, "Oh, no, don't get me wrong." He says, "I'm an Alabama fan. I hope he took the money." I got in my truck, couldn't get back to the state line fast enough. But that video is still on YouTube, and Caroline and Jane pulled up and laughed about it.
Yeah, I would have given anything to have seen after that 2010 game, the look when Alabama blew that lead of the Alabama fans when the Auburn fan had slipped a Cam Newton jersey on Bear Bryant's statue. That was probably Hiroshima times 10.
That story, there was actually a couple of women that came over here last week, I think it was. Yeah, last week they're doing a documentary. It's the 10-year anniversary of Cam Newton's national championship and Heisman Trophy win. So they're doing a documentary about it. But that was probably the craziest story, just because we were told that the money was funneled through a church. And so I probably went to 10 or 15 churches in Alabama running down, leads. And there was one point, this guy calls me and says, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you that my mom's a treasurer down at a church in Montgomery. There's a bunch of money missing. And I think they gave it to Cecil Newton." And I was like, "Wait a minute, man, you're like throwing your mom under the bus?" He's like, I said, "Are you an Alabama fan?" He goes, "Yeah." I mean, it was awful. And there wasn't any truth to it either, by the way.
Well, listen, as you well know, never let the facts get in the way of a good story, right?
Yeah, exactly. That rivalry is
nothing like it. Hey, is that one of the things too we've seen, and I think you've got a lot more of a journalism background there, but especially in this day and age, when I see broadcasters and reporters make the biggest mistakes, it's that race to be first, not the race to be right.
Yeah, no, it's Twitter changed everything. Twitter and social media. I mean, you know, it used to be. I mean, you were there back in the day. I mean, you'd stake out Buttsmere Hall waiting for Coach Dooley to come out to find out if he's going to hire Dave Perno as the baseball coach. And you get the scoop at midnight or 11 o'clock at night. And then the next morning you pick up the Atlanta Constitution or Atlanta Journal out of the driveway and you scooped everybody. And, you know, you didn't have to worry about some guy breaking in on Twitter at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're crazy ones. They're crazy ones like that.
Mark, what's the future for you? You just gotta keep on plugging away, doing what you're doing?
I don't think I have a choice. I don't know how to do anything else. You know, the senior PGA Tour, I guess, Champions Tour could be a possibility, but I just can't seem to break 90 these days.
Oh, well, Mark.
I'm still having fun. That's the most important thing.
Well, you're doing a great job. I'm so proud of you and everything. So you can hear my dog's chewing on his chicken squeaky toy that my mom bought him there. So
Mine is passed out of sleep.
That's what we do. So I really do appreciate it, Mark. I know you're busy. I appreciate the time, and hopefully we get to see you between the hedges and around this fall.
I hope so, too. I don't miss it if we don't.
All right, Mark. Thanks so much. Congratulations on everything. Really appreciate it.